It's truly the losses that made me who I am today. It wasn't the victories. It was the losses, because that's when I had to go back and I had to choose whether I wanted to grow from that experience or whether I wanted to stay complacent. And for me, complacency is where dreams go to die. So that wasn't an option for
Mm.
me. It's like, okay, I have dreams and I have goals and I missed the mark on this one. What was it? Why was it? What can I do better? How can I grow? How can I become a better human being and more well-rounded in everything that I do and bring to the table?
Wow. This episode is incredible. You are going to walk away with so many tangible tools that you can use in your life to help you get through challenges, whether they're big challenges or the small everyday challenges that we all experience. In this episode, Miesha Tate, who is a UFC champion, she won Big Brother 3 Celebrity Edition. She's an entrepreneur. She's a mother of 2. She is someone that we could all put on a pedestal. She is the symbol of strength and courage. And in this episode, she is so real and so vulnerable about the struggles that she has every single day and the tools that she incorporates into her daily life that have made all the difference. These are things that every single one of us can and should use every single day. Enjoy. All right, welcome, Miesha Tate. I'm so excited for our time together. You are an incredible, incredible woman, former UFC champion, warrior woman,
Thank you.
entrepreneur, and mother of 2. Welcome to the Be Inspired Mama podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I even did my hair for you today. So
you look so beautiful. What I was saying before we were recording is, can you believe this woman gets punched in the face for a living?
And I think my response,
like
I think your editor was like, "Oh, she must be good." I'm like, not necessarily. I just have hyperbarics to help heal me up pretty quick. So
whatever the tools are that we need to function as mamas, I'm all about it. It's so important. So clearly your tools are working for you. Also, I forgot to say, you are the former winner of Celebrity Big Brother 3. Like, what a cool accomplishment.
Yeah.
I have so many questions. I'm so excited to pick your brain.
So funny, because I didn't know that was going to be such a big thing. I wasn't like, I didn't watch it before. Not only do I not have time, but I just, if I'm watching things, it's usually sports. But a lot of people think that's really cool. And I think that's great that a lot of people think that that's cool. But it was so interesting to me because I had no idea. I had like 2 weeks to prepare for that. I was a last minute replacement. And then to go all the way and win the whole thing was kind of like mind blowing. What an experience.
Yeah, I can't even imagine living in a house. Like, I haven't watched the show, I don't think ever, maybe once, many, many years ago. But just living in a home like that?
Cannot recommend it. It was not a recommendable experience. But I'm glad it's done now. And, I put my mind to the task and happy with the outcome.
Well, speaking of the mind, I mean, so many of the things that you've done are all about the power of the mind. And the reason I love interviewing people like you is when you're talking about someone who's a high performer like you, whether it's athlete or, in business or anything, in my mind, at least, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but like, it's all about the power of mind. And what I mean by that is at some point your body fails, right? Or tells you enough is enough. And so for you, if we're talking about your training leading up to being a UFC champion, not that my listeners are necessarily aspiring to do anything like that, the rigorous training that you have to go through, the stuff that you push your body through when your body says enough is enough, this to me is all about the power of the mind. And, we're seeing a lot of tools coming out that I'm so happy about. These things have physiological benefits, but I think they also train our mind, like ice bath. Ice bath is one of my number one, like, okay, it's great for my body, but it's amazing for my mind. And as a mom, that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a big part of that is one thing, it's on a day-to-day when you talk about ice bath and these kinds of things, why you're saying it's so powerful for the mind, at least from my perception, is that it's part of getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, pushing yourself a little bit outside those normal zones of operation. That's like, okay, this is what I know. This is what I do. This is my daily, but what is going to advance us, and what's going to give us that kind of, like confidence that we conquered the day. Sometimes I feel like my to-do list is so long, and if I don't write it down and check it off, I'm like, at the end of the day, I know that my butt didn't even touch a seat the whole day. But what did I do? Like, what
Mm.
did I accomplish? Like, what was my moment of the day? And sometimes having those moments that you take, whether it's 4 minutes for an ice bath, which is realistic, 4 or 5 minutes for an ice bath, but you did something for yourself that challenged you and you conquered. So I think those little things are really important to implement. When you talk about mindset of, what are the things that I do when it's like, oh my God, the training is so hard and I've got so much to do. And now it's even more challenging that I have two kiddos, because the first chapter in my career was kid free, and I was able to dedicate most all of my effort and time and concentration on fighting. But once I became a mother, obviously everything became divided and my priorities really shifted. My children and my family are number one priority and fighting is number two. So how do I balance all that, especially on the days when it's like I'm tired and I've been up because I had sick kids and I've still got to be at training, and I've got to find a way to make it happen. It's about, for me, reminding myself about the end goal for me, and not the end, but the ultimate goal. Like, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish, and constantly bringing that moment into my present moment, bringing that moment and saying, okay, here and now is how I get what I want there. So I need to be here now. I need to be present for this right now. I'm going to take it one step at a time. I'm going to go to this one training. I'm going to make it really simple. I'm going to go to this one training session. I'm going to get through that. Then I'm going to come home and maybe I'm going to do that ice bath, or maybe I'm going to do something that makes me feel like I won the day. And then I'm going to make sure that I have some mindful time for my children. So I have all these ways of like breaking down and simplifying my daily to do, which can feel so overwhelming when you look at big picture. When I'm looking at, oh my God, I still have 6 more weeks of this camp, 8 more weeks, 12 more weeks. How am I going to do this? It's like, whew, all right, well, I've got a goal and I've just got to like simplify and do these little things that are going to keep me feeling like I'm still winning every day. And we're not going to win every day. Like, let's not create an illusion like I feel like I won every day. We don't win every day. But that's my
Mhm.
goal, is to feel like I'm winning a lot more days than I'm not, and it's okay sometimes to be like, I just sucked today. I didn't win today. It's okay. I needed that day where I could just suck. It's called being
Yeah,
human.
totally.
We just
Yeah.
suck some days, and that's okay too. I think that's a part of balance. It's a part of ebb and flow. Like, if we don't have days that we suck, we maybe can't appreciate the days that we're awesome. You know what I mean? Because if we're
So
awesome
true.
becomes the norm, then it becomes the expectation. And I don't think we're really appreciating everything that we're bringing to the table. So I think it's okay to have those days where it's like, oh, I really sucked today. It brings everything into
Yeah.
perspective.
It does. It's like that saying, "No rain, no rainbows."
Oh,
And it is hard. If you're someone who's used to, I think, vibrating on a pretty high level, right?
mm-hmm.
So, like, performing, doing all the things that you have to do. I think those sucky days, like, we can beat ourselves up about. But again, like you just said, it's so important. I mean, those days are a reality of being human, and I think we can allow ourselves to sit in them, kind of, observe and realize that it's okay, it sucked, but like move on and not beat ourselves up about it.
I think you're spot on there. I think we need to remember that those days are just as important as the days that we win. The days that we lose are the opportunity where we can reflect on how we can do better, self growth. I can compare that to fighting. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to be on top. It's so cool. Being a world champion is just awesome. Everybody is there and they want to, hang out with you, and you get all these great perks and things in life. But it's truly the losses that made me who I am today. It wasn't the victories. It was the losses, because that's when I had to go back and I had to choose whether I wanted to grow from that experience or whether I wanted to stay complacent. And for me, complacency is where dreams go to die. So that wasn't an option for
Mm.
me. It's like, okay, I have dreams and I have goals and I missed the mark on this one. What was it? Why was it? What can I do better? How can I grow? How can I become a better human being and more well rounded in everything that I do and bring to the table? And I'm so thankful for martial arts for me, because it taught me so much about that. It has given me so much perspective that I feel like it's a direct crossover to life, you know? And for me, I started wrestling when I was in high school, and I learned a lot about myself then, how tough I was, and also about changing people's perception. I was one of 2 girls on the wrestling team. My best friend and I went out for wrestling, and they certainly did not want us on the wrestling team. They tried to kick us off. I mean, they were hard on us. They didn't teach us anything. They basically just kicked our asses within like legal rights of of that. But like these guys were like, I mean, we had matte burns on our face. It was awful. And I remember by the time my senior year came around, I ended up winning the Coaches Award, which is given out to one athlete. Still one of my most prized moments, right up there with my UFC world title. But it was a moment that was for me. And at 17, 18 years old, learning that it could go from being absolutely hated, not wanted on the team, just, completely and utterly disrespected and disregarded as any type of athlete or competitor, simply for the fact that I was female, to changing that to being the one person on the team that was given an award that stands out, setting you as sort of the role model that more people should aspire to be like that. And mind you, I didn't win very many matches. I mean, I was competing against guys, so I didn't win much, but it taught me a lot about how hard work and dedication can change perception.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine that's what the coaches saw in you, like that inability to give up. Like you just would not give up no matter what they were putting you through.
I wouldn't give up. I'm so stubborn. You can ask my fiance.
But that's what I love about you, and that's why I wanted to bring you on here. And I think it's so good that, amidst that mindset and clearly with all of your accomplishments in life, like you have to have that adversity, right? Like
Yeah.
that you're comfortable being uncomfortable. And these are things we can all learn from. And I love how you touched on, the days that suck and that your matches that you lost were some of your greatest lessons. And I 100% see that, as a mom, as a person, not as a UFC fighter, but in my days where I'm in my lowest of lows, when I can take a minute and like, again, pull myself out of it, like those are the days when I have the most growth because
Yes.
the things that I'll do now in those days is I'll journal. Like, okay, let me get all the ugly out. Like, what is this that I'm feeling? Let me get it on
Yeah.
paper. Let me read something that's inspirational. Let me put on a podcast. Like, because I grapple for those tools that pull me out, those are my biggest winning days.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious for you, Miesha, like, I imagine losing a UFC fight it's got to be a bit of a blow to the ego, just like our days are as
Yeah.
moms. So like, how do you get to a place where you can learn from that experience?
Well, I'll give you two perspectives because my perspective's changed a lot since becoming a mom. But prior to becoming a mom, losing a UFC fight for me was like a part of me dying. I mean, it was extreme. I literally felt like a failure in everything that I did. I felt like that was my whole identity. I didn't have an identity beyond being a fighter. And I remember when I retired for about 5 years, I didn't think that I was going to come back to the sport. A big part of it was because I was even contemplating like awful, like life ending thoughts because I didn't know how to identify. I didn't show up for my last fight at all. And it was a lot to do with turmoil and I think a lot of toxicity, and I was burnt out and I was overworked. And I just wasn't there. I was somewhere else. I don't know where I was, but I wasn't in that fight. And at the end of that fight, I thought to myself, Miesha, you have to be honest with yourself right now. Like, this is not okay, the place that you're in. And you have two choices. Like, either you're going to continue this trajectory, which is really unhealthy for you mentally and emotionally, or you're going to accept that we're at rock bottom and there's no other way out but up at this point. So I had to let go of everything that I felt confidence in. I had to retire. I had separated from my ex at that point, thank goodness. and I left everything that was familiar to me, and I just went on a road trip. I took a couple weeks. I took my puppy, and for me, that was the reset I wanted because I didn't know anything about myself. I felt like I had thrown myself so hard into this sport that losing a fight was like, it was the most devastating thing. As I took that time to really start to self-analyze and look at myself and say, you know what decision would I make if it was just Miesha, like nobody else's input? And I really started a mission on self-discovery. And, then I met Johnny, my fiance. We had two beautiful children. We moved to Singapore. We lived there for a year and a half. I mean, I just gained all these beautiful life experiences and I had everything that I wanted. Then the pandemic hit and it kind of made me rethink, like, what do I really want out of life right now? What are my most important things? I think we all had to kind of self-reflect in those moments, right? Because we're stuck with ourselves in
Yeah.
our houses. Like, what else are you going to
Yeah.
do? So I really went deep in, and I said, the three most important things to me right now are family, family, friends, my relationships, time, and dreams and goals. And I said, so what, I have my family, my friends. What are my dreams and goals? And I said, you know what? I want to fight again. I have more to give than where I was at in my last when I left off. And so it became a personal mission for me. And then the time that I had to do it. So I came back, I had a successful debut, and it was just, it felt so amazing. And at this point now, I am no longer outcome based. I've learned this
Mm.
about myself, that I'm not outcome based, I'm effort based. If I'm putting all my effort into something and it doesn't pan out, I'm okay with it. Like, I'm so okay with losing a fight, which sounds crazy to say. I'm okay with that as long as I have put my best foot forward. And I'm okay with having a shitty day as long as I put my best foot forward. And I'm okay with losing, at life or making a mistake. Like, I just don't fear it anymore, because I look at these things and I say, I have an incredible tool set because I have asked the hard questions in myself. And I think that's what it really starts with. It really starts with asking those questions. And when you ask the questions, then you become aware of the things that are bothering you, whether it's past traumas. I mean, I think we all have our fair share. I think I would say 99% of the world out there has some kind of trauma in their childhood, and they may not even really be aware that that is as like it carries as much weight and momentum in their life as it does, because oftentimes it's something we shut away. We don't acknowledge it. We put it away. We've been told our whole life, it's just like, don't acknowledge it. We don't talk about those things. But I'm so glad that there's a movement out there now. And I really actually applaud you for speaking up. I loved what you put out on, just you were talking about it. I mean, I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but you talked about, your own struggles. And I think that's so powerful, because I think people need to realize that they're not alone in that. And I want people to know, they may look at me, I hear this so often, as a symbol of strength, and like, she just must have it. And just every day, like, she's been a world champion, she's just got it. I don't. I don't always have it. That's the truth. And I have struggled, and I've contemplated suicide. I have been in situations where I have been very, very depressed, and I had to pull myself out. And that's what I have. And everybody has that. Everybody has the strength to pull themselves out of dark places. It's just a matter, I think, of going inside, asking the hard questions, and starting to connect with yourself. Like, don't shut away,
Mm.
don't close all the doors and pretend like these things don't exist, and just become a workaholic so that you don't have to pay attention to how you feel. Right.
Yeah, all the distractions, right?
Right. I mean, so many people, I think, are workaholics because they don't want to give themselves time to be with themselves, because that's a scary place. And it is a scary place, but it's also a place where you can evolve past that. So you don't mind being with yourself anymore, so that you aren't, mentally and emotionally in a place of darkness and despair. Like, you can actually move beyond, you can start to work through, you can start to heal. And like what you said, about hitting that ice bath or doing those things, like you're putting on your podcast, like, what are you doing to problem solve those instead of just ignoring it or being a workaholic? Like, where's our mindfulness? How are we able to
Mhm.
work through some of these issues? And so for me, I'm really happy to say that I'm at a place now where losing a UFC fight is nothing more than an opportunity for me to grow and get better. I have nothing to prove to anybody else. Like, my family and my children and my fiance, they are the people, and my parents, and my friends that matter, and they don't care if I win or if I lose. And that's, and so for those reasons, it's like, I mean, I care because I put a lot of work into it. Don't get me wrong. I put a lot of work into it. So I obviously want to be successful. I don't want anybody to be confused. Like, oh, she just doesn't give a shit. No, I care. I care a lot, because my family sacrifices, I sacrifice to get through those camps and to do all the things that I need to do in order to win. So it certainly sucks. Like, it's not fun to lose, but it doesn't define me. I'm not a loser or a
Yeah.
winner. I am Miesha Tate. I am myself. I'm my own woman. I am a mother. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm doing all these things. I have a beautiful life. And sometimes it's just about reminding myself of that I have it. It's okay. And whatever issues that I have, I believe I also have the tools and resources to heal. And Sometimes that's reaching out to your friends. Sometimes it's a conversation. Sometimes it's a podcast. Sometimes it's a self-help book. Sometimes, like you mentioned, journaling. I think that's beautiful. Like I don't journal regularly, but I have found it very powerful when I've been in the darkest moments, when I've really needed to have conversations with myself and get to a point where I can self-reflect and start to say, what could make me feel better? Like what's something that I could do right now to just lift my spirits? What's one thing? Is it donating to a charity? Is it going out and volunteering some time? Is it putting on my brain tap headset and taking 20 minutes for myself? Is it 4 minutes of box breathing? Like sometimes we don't have a lot of time, but you'd be surprised what 3 deep breaths can do.
Mhm.
One deep breath. But are we even giving ourselves the internal dialogue to be mindful of what we're actually going through? Or are we just throwing our head in the sand and just working ourselves to death? Because I just can't believe in the core of my being that that is our purpose in life.
100%. Oh my goodness. Thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing all of that. That's so refreshing. And I'm glad, like you said, it's not that you don't care about not winning, but you're no longer tying it to your identity. And I think
Yeah.
that's the key takeaway for all of us, that you're effort based instead of outcome based. Because I think, especially for moms, and I know you can relate to this, we
Hmm.
tend to lose our identities,
Oh, yeah.
right? Or we make our identity how the day went. And if we tie that to how our kids' emotions are, or did we maybe not show up the way we wanted to? It's such a massive blow when you tie those things to your identity. And I think that's where a lot of the mom
Yeah.
shame, the mom guilt, all those things come from. So I love that shift of, it's effort based. Did I try my best today? Did I do
Yeah.
my best? Can I do better tomorrow? And I think the other key thing that you mentioned is, that people look at you as the source of strength. And I think this is really relatable. I think a lot of us have these people that we put up on these
Hmm.
pedestals that these things just come easier for. And that's also what I want to blow the lid off on this podcast,
Yeah.
is taking people like you and showing all of us how real you are, and that you also have these struggles. But I think what the key difference is that you surround yourself with tools,
Yeah.
and you choose to use those tools every day, whether they're challenging in the moment or not, because over time it creates massive change for you.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And I want to point out I didn't always have those tools. It's not like I knew how to do it. I just I just knew there had to be a way. There had to be a way because the purpose of life is not for us to be miserable and sad. What happens is
Mhm.
that children are born with a lot of love. This is what I believe. Children are born with a lot of love, and the world and their surroundings slowly take away from that. And I look at my job as a parent as not to mold my children. It's more to like try to keep them away from being tainted. Like they're perfect how they are. I just want to let them
Mhm.
flourish. That's it. Like I just want them to know that they're loved and that they can think for themselves and that they can do and be whatever they want. And I want to keep that love for as long as I can. I know it's a hard world and there's going to be a lot of mean things. And, even going to school, like there's struggles that they have to deal with. But I always tried for my children to make it relatable. And I also encourage parents to be as transparent as age appropriate with their children. I have a 4.5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old. When I came home with a big laceration on my face and a black eye and a swollen nose and a swollen face, it wasn't, mommy, what happened? Does it hurt? It wasn't like, oh no, I'm not talking about that. I think that was a generation that our parents came from where they weren't told that, anything if mommy was crying, it was go away. I'm fine, leave me alone.
Mhm.
No, like I look
Yeah.
at those opportunities as a chance to teach our children about the world and to hold their hand through something we're walking through so that when they get there someday they're going to remember, you know what, I remember mommy working through hard times. I remember those conversations. I talk to my daughter all the time, when I have a bad day or I snap on her, and it wasn't her fault. It was something, I was overworked, I was overtired, I was trying to pay attention to this, and she's asking for something simple, and it's just too much for me to give in that moment because I've given so much of myself otherwise. It's sitting down and saying, you know what, honey, I'm really sorry. Mommy's having a hard day today, and I that wasn't your fault, and I'm not perfect, honey, or I'm so sorry I forgot your water bottle today. Mommy makes mistakes too. I'm sorry you'll have to have, school, whatever it is. I'm making up silly examples, but these are things that really happen. And I think it's a chance to have a conversation as opposed to just like, it just ignore it or not explain. Like, I want to walk my children through those things and show like I'm not perfect. I want to show them that I don't have it all together and I make mistakes and sometimes I hurt their feelings and sometimes, I'm just not having a good day. Sometimes it's just hard. And I want them to
Mhm.
actually see that. I don't want to shield them from it. I want to, age appropriately walk them through it and say, Mommy's having a hard day. I'm sad today. Or I'm sorry. I forgot this. Or, you know what, honey, I told you that I was going to pick you up early today from school and I was going to take you to the park and we are going to have mommy daughter time. And I am so sorry that's not going to happen today because mommy has something that came up and I'm really, really sorry. I made a mistake. I'm not able to fulfill this goal for you today, but I'll tell you what, like I will make it up to you. Or what's something that will make you happy? I want her to know that sometimes I'll have the best of intentions and I'm going to come up short. And when I do come up short, I need to own it. I need to let her know it's not her, right? We need to clarify that it's not her. It's not that I don't want to be with her. I tell her, I would love nothing more, honey, than to hang out with you all day. But I have to work because if I don't work, and I'm 4 years old, I try to say, like, what if we didn't have a house? What if we didn't have food? What if we didn't have, because some kids don't have that. Some kids don't have Christmas presents, Mommy and daddy have to work so we can make money, so we can do these things with you. But it doesn't mean I don't love you and I don't want to spend time with you. So I think every opportunity that we go through hardship is an opportunity to teach our children how to get through hardship and that it exists so they're not blindsided by it. I think it's always great. I know for me it's been so empowering to see other people. This is going to sound terrible, but to see other people going through struggles. It's
Mm.
just empowering because I just know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. I don't want anybody to go through struggles. Like if we didn't have to, it'd be great. But the reality is we all are. But why do some of us feel so alone? Like why do so many, I think about Twitch, and the suicide and people will look at him and say, but he had it all. Well, I don't know Twitch, but looking from the outside in, my assumption is that he also probably thought, well, if I have it all and I still feel like this, if these demons or whatever you want to refer to them, these feelings of sadness are still coming back, no matter how good I have it, they're always going to be there. That's really
Mm.
tough. That's even worse. It would be one thing if he was or any of us were in a bad situation, be like, well, that makes sense to feel sad. But, Lisa,
Mhm.
I think there's a lot to childhood trauma. I think there's a lot there that needs to be unpacked. But I just find it very empowering. So I kind of want to continue to empower my children to realize that none of us are perfect. We all struggle. We all make mistakes. It's okay. Own up to it. And at the end of the day, they're very loved.
Yeah, I love, you and I get to have this conversation every now and then through messages and stuff. I know
Yes.
we share some parenting podcasts and stuff, and it's just so refreshing. I think for one, it takes the pressure off of us as
Yeah.
parents. We're living in a different time than our parents, and I want to touch on that with you in a minute. Our parents obviously did the best that they could with what they knew.
Yes.
And I feel like now with what we know, there's a lot of pressure on us to like not mess up our kids
Yeah.
because we know the way that our emotions can impact them. And, I raised my kids very similar to the way that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've told them since they were very young, no matter what, if you don't love the answer, if it's not a great answer, like I will always tell you the truth, even if it's hard
Yeah.
truths. And this is like one of the foundations in my relationship of trust with them.
Trust
And they
building.
know,
Mm-hmm.
like, they have so much safety. They know if they ask me something like, I'm trying to think of an example, but like, are we safe? There's a hurricane. Are we safe? Like, I will look them in the eye and I will give them the absolute 100% truth that I have. And they know that. And I think there's a lot with that. And I also, just like you, I role model for my children that I mess up. I'm doing my best and it's okay because I'm human. And so it gives them permission to do the same.
Yes.
And and I feel these emotions, right?
Yes.
So, like, my kids have seen me crying. They have seen that I have a tough day and it's okay. Like, I also wanna navigate my children's emotions with them by going through them. And I wanna ask you, I think, like you've said, a lot of us have traumas in our
Yeah.
past, and I think what's key to talk about is there's what we call like big trauma or big
Yeah.
T and little trauma or little t.
Hmm.
And so it doesn't mean we need to be like living on the streets starving for food or that our parents like abused us or anything.
Correct.
These challenges and adversity that have created our story, they can be big things or small things, but they're perceived the same way. And I
Yes.
think it's really like what the reason I love to know people's backgrounds is I feel like you get a better understanding of why we are the way that we are.
Yes.
So I would love to hear from you, like what about your upbringing has turned you into the person that you are as a fighter and as a mother with how you want to raise your children?
Well, I would like to address the pressure that I feel like is on parents and probably particularly mothers in today's society of being cycle breakers. We talked about our parents and their upbringing, and I don't believe in shaming our parents because again, I think they did the best that they could, and we have to be empathetic to their upbringing was different than ours. So there's a trickle effect here, and when you want to start making it different than it was before, it's really hard. So I admire and applaud anybody who is trying to break that cycle. My upbringing, I was born to a single mom, and for the first 2.5, 3 years of my life, there was his name was Drew, and he was the father figure to me. My mom and Drew were together, and I, thought at that age, I was little, he was my dad. But when they separated, it was devastating to me. And it happens, it's nobody's fault, but I just remember that being a devastating experience. And then she met my dad who raised me. His name is Rob. So they're still together and he raised me, but he was very young and, had again, a problematic, troubled childhood himself. So he was more like a big brother than necessarily than a father figure for a while, up until my teenage years, I would say. And we had quite a bit of trauma in our past is just like, and I talk about it, it's kind of more little t. And I want people to understand what little t is because I feel like that doesn't get addressed enough. We obviously know big T traumas are things that are like, rape or being physically abused or sexually abused. I mean, these are big mile marker traumas, but let's please not diminish how powerful a 1 out of 10 trauma is every single day of your life, multiple times a day, or a 4 out of 10 trauma every single day of your life. Those just start to become part of your belief system in yourself as a child. And I don't know if people really realize how impactful I think that is as we become adults. Then I found out, who my biological father was at about 5 years old. He sent a Christmas card. So I have a relationship with my biological father as well. But in all of that, I think as a child, it was very confusing to me, feeling like the turmoils of men leaving my life. And I think that I believe that I developed sort of daddy issues, I guess you could say, because, the one who I was so close to, was so bonded to at 2.5 years old, when he left my life. And then eventually when he got married and he moved away, I mean, I just remember bawling when I was at his wedding. And when he told me he was moving away, I mean, I just was devastated. I was devastated because, mind you, my mom worked and he didn't. So he was primarily my caretaker. So anyways, moving forward then to, kind of my dad was in the army, who raised me. I'm going to say my dad. That's who I'm calling my dad. He was in the army. He was very militant. He was a big, loud, guy. And when he would, lose his temper, was never physically abusive or anything like that to me. But he just didn't know how to be any different because that's how he was raised, he was raised that way. So again, we talk about trickle effect. So my mom is just a beautiful woman, and she's so incredibly strong for all the things that she's endured. But it was hard for her to figure that out. And this is at a time when the resources were much more limited. People didn't have these kinds of ways, podcasts and conversations and, the internet and all the tools that I lean to heavily to help myself. So anyways, one thing I will praise my mom for is always she had open dialogue. We always talked about things, even when, we fought and I would storm off and I would be so frustrated. She would always let me calm down. She would come up and say, you know what, Miesha, I want to hear your side of the story. I want to hear why we got to this point. What was your perception? And why did you think that? And I would talk about it and she'd say, okay, now hear my side. This is what I was thinking. This is why I reacted the way that I reacted. And that open communication, I believe, is what made me who I am today, like the core of who I am. The knowing that I was heard was so important to me, to being able to express, where we both were coming from. So it gave me an opportunity to look at the other side and be empathetic. Like, okay, mom, I'm not as upset as you now because now I understand. Now I'm not angry
Mm,
anymore. Maybe I'm still hurt or I'm still processing, but I thank you for hearing me out. And maybe you're not as mad at me as you were because this is what I was thinking. So that was huge and something I really still implement in everything that I do with my children. But my mom, where I would say that I adopted some of the more negative habits, was that my mom was so strong, so she could endure. And you think a lot of women are really strong and we can endure. So we do. Just because we can endure doesn't mean that we should have to. It doesn't mean that
right.
we should be in toxic relationships where we are, a slave in so many ways to everyone else's needs. And we have to say yes to everybody and we're there to accommodate everybody. It's not healthy. And I found myself in a relationship like that for 9 years. And I stayed because I saw my mom stay. I saw her endure in a lot of things that I look back on now. And I'm like, this is just, this set the tone for my expectation on how I should be, how I should be in a relationship, and what I should accept and what I should tolerate. The strength that I saw in my mother, to her own fault, set me up for strength in two ways. Was, one, to endure inside a relationship, and the other to endure inside the ring. I think that's what gave me the toughness that I have. I think it was my mom. I'm like, oh my God,
Totally.
my mom was pregnant, 9 months pregnant, working graveyard, taking care of two other kids, myself and my brother, and managing the house, cooking dinner. I mean, I still don't know how she possibly did all that. I don't know. I don't know, but she was worth the weight of 10 men, to be honest. Like, she
Mm,
still is. But now I'm like, mom, like, you don't have to do all that. Like, you are taken care of and you don't need to do all that. Do something that makes you happy. Like, that would be great. Like, do some things that make you
mm,
happy. But I watched her sacrifice. I mean, I didn't grow up well off. I mean, there was points when we were still mostly a single mom. Like, she was dating my dad again, the one who raised me, the one they're still together. But they weren't like in a financial, like they weren't together yet in that aspect. And we had the power turned off in the middle of the winter. And my mom had a friend who would come over and who worked for the electric company, and he would just flip on our power switch. But we had to keep it so low that the power company wouldn't, shut it
oh
off
my
again.
gosh.
So we had one heater in one back room, and
Right.
that's all that we would run off of. I ate cereal every single day. She would, like, we were just, yeah, the toilet waters was frozen. Like, I remember that as a kid being like, that doesn't look the
Wow.
same as it normally does. But it was frozen. Like, we definitely had our hardships. And even once my mom and my dad came together and they both worked and busted their asses, my mom would have holes in her shoes, and we would have new school. She would make sure we had new school shoes. They might have been really, really cheap, but we had that. And she made sure that the essentials were covered, no matter what she had to give up to sacrifice that. Like, she made sure that
Mm,
we were loved and that we were taken care of. So all those things definitely helped me have strength and endure. But I can honestly say, like, I'm really proud of myself for getting to a point now where I know that I can endure and that I have that strength, but I recognize that that's not the expectation, that I don't have to give 200% of myself to where I have nothing left for me. That's not the expectation. It's my ability, but it's not my
mhm,
expectation. I need to give back to myself, because I also realize that if I'm not the best version of me, if I'm not at my metaphorical 100, not that I'm perfect every day, but if I can't give
mhm.
the best of myself to myself, nobody gets the best of me. My kids
So
don't get
true.
the best version of me. My fiance doesn't get the best version of me. My friends, my interviews, my fights, nobody gets the best Miesha Tate if I can't find the best Miesha Tate. And that starts with serving me first. I always love the analogy, as cliche as it is. I know everybody's heard it, but you put your own mask on first in the airplane, right? And then you help. Why? Because that's a prime example of if you don't service yourself first, you are of no help to anybody else. If you pass out on that plane, guess what? Kids are passing out too. So in order for
Yeah.
you to serve others and help people, you've got to put your mask on first, right? That's how you give the best of yourself to other people. So for me, it's setting those, setting the time with intention. It's not just about reading a chapter of my book or putting my brain tap on or those things. It's like, it's also the mindfulness of going inside and saying, I'm doing this for me. This is a mindful moment. I'm going to take this 2-minute shower and I'm going to turn everything off and I'm going to be alone with myself and I'm going to just feel the water. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm just going to reset in this moment because I know if I reset, I can be better for myself and everybody else around me.
Yeah, totally. So, so true. It's, I love that you touched on setting that intention. And also, it sounds like you do what I do. And I think what we need to do as moms, especially strong moms who can endure and can do it all. Not that we need to do it all. I think a lot of us are doing way more than we need to be doing. But I've had to leverage it with the oxygen mask symbol as well. Like if I'm not good, they're going
Yeah.
down. I think we have to make it really powerful so that we say yes to ourselves and
Yes.
saying no to, whether it's some responsibilities or saying no to our child, like, no, I can't help you right now. I need a minute.
Yeah.
Um, I've created an acronym for myself that no stands for nourish oneself. So like I'm saying no to you so I can say yes to myself. And for you as well, I know you've got a son and a daughter. Don't you think these are such powerful things that we're showing, especially our little girls, that it's okay for us
Yes.
to do?
100%, and I think that's really powerful, nourish oneself. But I think to add to that, which I know we've had conversations and I think that you already implement this, but no to a child doesn't have to mean rejection. I think a lot of parents struggle with that,
Mm.
like, oh, if I say no to my kid, that's wrong. No, it's not wrong, but it's all the way that you communicate with your child. So I have a 4.5-year-old, and when I tell her, honey, how many mommies are there? And she goes, one. I say,
Mm.
how many children are there? She says, two. I said, okay, so mommy's doing her best to help you and Daxton. I love you both. But right now, mommy's hungry. I already fed you guys and I have to eat, sweetheart, or I'm going to be hungry how you were feeling. Remember when your tummy was hurting, walking her through and showing her to have empathy towards mommy too, that not only am I outnumbered, but I'm probably freaking hungry, like just like simplifying it for her, just saying like, I'm not
Yeah.
saying no to playing with you right now. I'm saying I need something real quick, sweetheart. I need something. It's not no, I don't want to play with you. It's not no, I don't love you. It's not no, like I'm rejecting
Yeah.
you. It is, hang on a second, sweetie. I would love to play with you, but I need to eat first, or
Mm.
I'm going to have that pain in my belly that you had when you came home from school and you demanded your after school food. Like being the relatable. And so she can understand, like, it's not, no is not about rejecting her. It's about mommy's got to sometimes service herself. I've got to do something for me. I've got to finish this really quick. And when I'm done with that, I would love to. I would love to be there for you, but I need a little time for me real quick. And I try to make it relatable so she can understand that this is not a reflection of how I feel about her. It's not a
Yeah.
rejection.
I love that. And, one of the things that I'm noticing from the outside with the way that you're having these conversations with them is that in order to do so, in order to be able to be
Yes.
present in that moment, you have to take good care of yourself as a mother. Do you agree? Like if you're like da 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 running on fight or flight
1,000%.
when your kid needs you
Yeah.
and you don't have a second, like that conversation is not going to show up the way that you just said it. But when you're taking care of
Yeah.
yourself, whatever that looks like, even if it's 30 extra seconds in the hot
Yeah.
shower, you can have those conscious conversations.
Exactly. It's a trickle effect. When if you wake
Mhm.
up in the first 5 minutes of your day, you hit whatever it is, you hit a meditation, you journal, whatever your thing is. For me, a lot of times I'll throw on my brain tap headset, and I'll put it on. I talk about that a lot, or I have a little core device and I'll hit 3 minutes of box breathing. It's just knowing that it's okay to put myself as the first priority of the day, because it feels really good knowing that, okay, I am better for today. That means everybody gets me better today, right?
Yeah.
I
Oh,
am servicing other people better by servicing myself. And that's a point that's a lot of times missed is people forget, and they just want, the expectation again, we go back to that it's to deliver 200% to everybody else all the time. But that is also, I believe, how we stress ourselves into states of being unwell, being sick. I mean, there are hormonal responses. I mean, I know you know this, but for the listeners, hormonal responses that happen in our body when we stay in states of chronic stress. A lot of my perception and like conceptualization when I talk about these things goes back to what was stress originally designed for? It was designed to save our lives. Like we were going to get eaten, by a lion or something. Like, okay, that's a reason to be stressed. There's a lion over there. Or, maybe we're starving to death. Maybe that's a reason to be stressed. We need to find food. That's pretty much it. So what is all this? Like we've created this society and this life with all these expectations and money, which is really realistically just paper, but we've like made it all about this. And then in the process, I think a lot of times we've lost sight of what is actually most important. What is actually most important? And for me, that's moments in time. That's what's most important. And how do I create those moments in time so that someday when I am on my deathbed, I don't want to look back and say, what did I do with my life? I just worked all the time. That's what I spent my life doing. Or even get to retirement age that I've stressed myself out so bad, maybe gained weight, maybe I have health issues, maybe I have high blood pressure, maybe this is a scenario that happens for a lot of people. We obviously know like a lot of people are on prescription medications and things. And I just want to say, like, I think there's a stronger correlation between all the stress that adds up and the things that we maybe need to look at as a little less important, for me, a lot less important than the things that actually matter and actually are going to service us in our purpose in life. Like, what were we meant to do? Were we meant to wake up all day, be unhappy, work 16 hours a day, and then go to sleep, to not have good sleep because we're stressed out, to wake up and do it all again, hit repeat until we're to retirement age? And then what? Yeah. Then we're probably sick from all of that because we've been borrowing from the future. Honestly, that's how I look at that. When we put ourselves in emotional and mental deficits, the body follows the mind, right? So when our mind is not healthy, our bodies tend to not be as healthy. We have hormones that are running through our bodies that are holding on to weight, that are causing us to be more hungry, causing us to be anxious, to not sleep well. All these things are taking away from our ability to be healthy. And yeah, for what? So that when we retire, we can be sick and have a bunch of medical bills, all that money that we might have saved, that we were going to finally start living our life at, 68? We were finally going to start doing it. But now, I mean, we have cancer, we have all these things. It's like, no, you got to find the moments in time today. You got to find 15 minutes today. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be all day, every day. But for me, it looks like mindful mornings with my children. I don't turn on the TV when we go downstairs first thing, and that they often ask me for that because, of course, they love the TV. Okay. But no, we're taking the first 10. I would love it to be 30. I aim for 30. Sometimes it's 10. Take the first 10 minutes of the day and we're just going to talk about, did you have any dreams? What's going on today? We're going to play. We're going to have breakfast. We're going to whatever transpires in that. But we're going to connect in the morning because that's the start of the day. Then maybe we'll do 5 or 10 minutes of TV, especially if I've got a lot of stuff I've got to get done before I take them in to school. Then I'm going to take them to school. Then when I pick them up, I've got to be prepared to put my phone away for a little bit here. We're going to have another 30 minutes of mindful time. You're going to help me make dinner. We're going to do something together. You're going to know that I love and care about you. These are the moments in time. It's not the whole day, but it's what I can do. It's what I can give. And to me, those are the moments I know will stand out to my children too. Like when they look back on their childhood, they're going to remember that there were a lot of moments that mommy was present. It wasn't all the time, but that when I was there, I cared and I loved and I was there with my whole heart. And so I do encourage parents to set mindful time for your children because you're going to be so much more fulfilled and you're going to feel rewarded for having those mindful 10 minutes, 15 minutes, beginning and end of the day. If you can not be on your phone while you're reading your child's story or you're reading that bedtime story and you get that text message and you're like, hang on, kid, I got to do this. No, that is where you have to draw the line. It's not that you don't have the work to do, but can it wait just 15 minutes? Can we just have 15 minutes of really dedicated, mindful time to our children because it matters to them? And that's what they're going to remember. It doesn't have to be all day. It doesn't have to be perfect. And, but it's got to be there, in my opinion, and those are some of the things that I do to implement and let my children know that I love them and that they matter and that I will be fully present at times because they are my priority. At times I will be fully present.
Yeah, it matters to them and it matters to us. And I'm so glad, as we wrap this up, like I couldn't have asked for a better point for you to make. I know we can all live the life of our dreams. We all deserve to, and people are doing it. We can. And I think you just hit on the key aspect of that. And for someone who's extremely busy, right?
Yeah.
Like you have so many hats that you wear, it's about quality over quantity.
Yeah.
And, whether I think a lot of my listeners are parents. And so this can be with our children, this can be with ourselves. You've touched on the importance of going inward, right? Like going inward and taking that time and not just distracting ourselves away from our feelings, but
Yes.
those 5 minutes that I take with my children in the morning with the screens down, it's a struggle, even I think this day and age, to sit together around the
It
table.
is.
um, there's a lot working against us as parents, as humans who want
Yes.
these present mindful times. But if we can just get a few minutes here and there, that's at the end of the day, at the end of our lives, like to me, that is the ultimate living the life of our dreams.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's a beautiful button on this. And it is an uphill battle. I'm not saying that it's easy, but I really believe that for me, it's been very true that when I am mindful in everything, with my intentions, what I'm doing for myself, I'm mindful. What I'm doing for my children, I'm mindful. And when I'm working, I'm mindful. And I'm not trying to cross over all the time. When I try to cross over
Mhm.
a lot, at the end of the day, a lot of times I just feel like I did nothing well. I
Okay.
feel
Yeah.
defeated.
Mhm.
I feel like, I
Yeah.
was there, I was going through the motions, but I was distracted in everything that I did, and then nothing did I do well. And this day just sucked. I just sucked today. Whereas
Yeah.
when I take time to be mindful and isolate the time for my kids, the time for me, and the time to work, and we're drawing lines in the sand there, and I try to adhere to that, I feel so much better as a person. I feel so much better as a
Mhm.
mother, and I feel so much better as that entrepreneur and that workhorse. I'm like, I'm hitting everything in stride here. Like this feels good. I feel accomplished for the day. And that's what I think we were meant to do. Like we were meant to feel good. We were meant to feel happy. We were meant to feel loved. So it starts with
Yeah.
loving yourself.
Yeah, I mean, we're meant to live in the flow, and that's what happens when you do these things presently, right?
Exactly.
You're either work or with kids as much as possible. You're living in the flow, and that feels
It
good.
does.
Misha, I want to ask you one last question. So, again, I think you hit so many home runs in this podcast, so many nuggets for our listeners, and I'm so thankful for that. And I want to ask, one last thing for, perhaps the moms, the parents that feel like a failure at times, that
Yeah.
they're not doing it all right, or perhaps people who don't have children yet. I mean, we all are probably our worst critic. What advice would you give them in those moments?
Well, first of all, this is a lot easier said than done, and not all of this is going to happen overnight. This is a progression, but not acknowledging how we feel doesn't help. It doesn't help, and it's not going to go away. It will continue to haunt you, whether it's in your dreams, literally at night, or whether it's in those moments. Sometimes, I've heard people say like, oh, when I get anxious or get upset, I put music on, or I have to find a distraction. No, like I would encourage people less distraction and more focus. Instead of trying to put, something on so that you don't feel that way, take a minute or 5 minutes and be alone with yourself and start to let a little bit of that in. And it can be a lot. It can feel like a lot. So take it with stride, like what you're comfortable with, but start to have some internal dialogue. Maybe start to ask like, why am I having anxiety right now? Because maybe like for me, I'll get anxiety or depression at random times, and it's not chronic, it's fleeting. But then I wonder like why? Like why am I having this right now? This like doesn't really match up with like currently the current state of my life. Like I'm having a pretty good day. Like I'm not fighting with my fiance. Like things are good. Like generally speaking, like so
Mhm.
why? And then I might find it was this little trigger, and maybe I'm able to connect it to something in my childhood, or connect it, however it may be the reason why. If I could give like a really short example, I know we're tying this up, but Johnny said something to me at one point when and it hurt my feelings a lot, but it was not even anything bad. It wasn't meant to hurt my feelings, but he said, oh, you won't remember. And I remember thinking like, Man, that really hurts, but that's so true. Like, there's so many instances in my life I don't have a lot of memory. Like, why is that? And I think because part of my coping skill that I developed as a child was a lot of it was not wanting to be present. My parents fought a lot as a kid growing up. They fought a lot, and a lot of times it just wasn't a place I wanted to be. Hence why I dove myself into sports. I was a sports addict. After school, I was a sports addict, and it wasn't I had a pretty good upbringing, I guess, by the American standard and norm, but it was hard. I saw my mom sad a lot and I saw my dad mad a lot. And the fights were not, they were not arguments. Like they were like screaming, throwing things, you know what I mean? Like not at each other. It wasn't like physical. I don't, my dad never hit my mom, but it was hard as a child to see that. And just something I realized, like a lot of times if I couldn't physically go somewhere else, I went somewhere else in my head and I wasn't present. I learned how to not be present. So that's a skill set I realized I've still carried over in my life. And a lot of moments in my life, I have chose not to be present because that's just how I learned how to function. And then I'm like, I don't need to do that anymore. I'm going to start really being present. I'm going to look people in the eye when I'm talking to them. I'm going to remember their face. I'm going to remember their name. I'm going to choose to handle these situations different. I'm not going to default to how I just learned to grow up and not be present. So for me, that was part of it, that internal dialogue. I think everyone is going to have their own journey in that. But I just encourage you to get a little more comfortable with being alone with yourself and alone with your thoughts. If it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, and start to ask yourself why. Why do you feel that way? What's going on? Because you are the most powerful healer in your life and you have the answers within yourself. But you've got to ask the hard questions and you've got to be willing to be a little uncomfortable. And you've got to be willing to learn from your losses. And it's a process, It's not a one day thing, it's months and years of, being introspective.
Love that. Thank you. The people that I look up to, Miesha, I'm crazy about you. It's because of those things. Like in my mind, you are one of the most successful people I know. And it's because of those habits, those rituals, those viewpoints on life, the willingness to work on yourself, to go inward.
Yeah.
Hands down, I think that is one of the most important practices that anyone can acquire, like going in and taking that time, getting uncomfortable, getting comfortably
Being
comfortable
uncomfortable, yes.
being uncomfortable, because it's not always fun to go into those feelings.
Yeah.
But I thank you for being vulnerable. I thank you for sharing all these incredible tools. I'm so excited for people to walk away with all this information.
Thank
Love you, sister.
you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Miesha Tate. There are so many tangible tools that you can implement right away into your life. If you like this episode as much as I think you did, go ahead and hit the like button. I would love to hear your comments. Go ahead and add them below. And as always, I know there's someone in your life, whether it's a family member or a friend, that can benefit from this information. How great of you to send it along to them. And lastly, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of my exciting upcoming episodes. See you soon. If you have... every time, go ahead and share and we'll not like review. Toodles. TTFN.